Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism, a podcast asking the question, what does it mean to be fully alive in the 21st century? What can we do to best embody that aliveness while dealing with the unique stressors that we're facing in this strange and potent time? I'm your host, Brett Kane. I'm a licensed massage therapist and mindfulness meditation instructor, and joining us today is my new friend and fellow bodywork practitioner, Russell Stolzoff, out of Bellingham, Washington. Russell has been practicing what is known as structural integration, more commonly referred to as Rolfing, since 1989. He's served as chair of the Rolf Institute Board of Directors and is currently a member of the Rolf Institute's Executive Education Committee. He's the founder of RolfingWorks out of Washington, and he's overall a really good educator on what exactly this modality is. So without getting too into it here in this intro, Rolfing is something that seeks to alleviate chronic pain and help generate more easeful movement by addressing the body's myofascial system. So we do get into that, so hold on to your britches. Before we get started, I just want to say bodywork to me it's one of my passions, and I didn't realize it was one of my passions until I really got started with it. I really think this offers it's the forefront of expanding consciousness by understanding that the body is just mind condensed. So a lot of people in the scenes that I kind of came up in, which the music festival scenes, spiritual scenes, when we talk about transformation, radical transformation, a lot of people point towards plant medicines. I think, yes, these are very important things. I have an episode on them with Sean and Cass from Variape TV, and it's a very valid way to do it, but it's not really accessible to everybody. There are certain dispositions that I don't think it's radical enough to reach them, whereas I think bodywork is already such an ingrained part of our society, and for me, it just seems like a much more natural and less destructive form of subtly changing people's perceptions of themselves and their relationships. And that's really what drew me to it, is that it's mind and body, though we are addressing the body. It's a bottom-up approach rather than the top-down approach. And Rolfing is a really cool practice in that it has this kind of baked into it. You talk to certain structural integration practitioners, and we're using the body to transform the mind. And we don't talk about it too much here, but I wanted to really expand the view of why I think bodywork is an important part of the view of cultivating vitality. It is radical in that it is accessible to everybody. It's radical in that our experiences get baked into our bodies. So how do you process those experiences but seeking a practitioner who can help you hold space to feel where you're holding tension and then training the body to let it go? Vitality flows with lack of tension. So bodywork is a part of the view that I'm offering on this show. And I think it's important, even if it's not your natural inclination to tune into something like this, give it a second and, hear where we're going with it. Hear, the passion that Russell brings to this is honestly really inspiring. The fact that he's been doing it since 89, for me, it bodes well for, job security, I guess, if you will, as someone who also does this, but also that this is a very deep and rich world that can bring so much healing and so much joy and understanding and expansion to people's lives that I think everybody should have some sort of bodywork kind of relationship, whether it's even just doing yoga and Tai Chi. We need to be doing something. We need to have something in our lives that brings us into our body, not to escape the mind, but as a means to contextualize the mind. And I think getting started, it really helps to have a guide. And that's really what bodywork is doing, is we're creating neural pathways for you to know yourself differently. So today is going to be all about the amazingly rich world of structural integration. We also do talk a little bit as practitioners, so we talk about the power of intention and how the intention shapes the thing almost more than the vehicle of modality does. The power of having a narrative with what you're doing, respecting science, but also not being limited in that we can step into other worlds and actually create really palpable, lasting change through the integrity of our touch. So that's a lot of what this episode is about. It was really cool for me to be able to pick his brain on something I've kind of always had in the back of mine as a genuine interest and potential career choice. And he really inspired me to, again, deepen my practice and deepen the space of practitioner and work with my clients in a more expansive and gentle way, honestly. So that's what we're going to be doing today, guys. I do want to start off by saying that I had an issue with my recording thing, so I switched to Zoom really last minute. We were essentially on the call, and I'm like, I got to order Zoom. So I didn't realize that Zoom has some poopy audio. Russell sounds great. He's got that rich, wonderful voice, but for some reason it mangled me a little bit. So I sound like I'm talking at you through a tin can. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. That was the recording. Yeah, last minute things, they cause for last minute adaptations. And now I have a Zoom program, so that's fun. So just wanted to give you a heads up for that. If you want to support the show, if you really like what we're doing here with this wide umbrella of what wellness is, including the external world as a part of our equilibrium within ourselves, then head on over to Apple Podcast, leave us a review. Even if it's a bad review, I really want to know. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear if this is landing, if it's not landing. I'm really good with constructive criticism. I'm also good with compliments. Load me up. I love that too. Head on over to YouTube, subscribe there, like, comment, all that stuff. Instagram, Facebook, you can follow us on there to stay up to date on all the newest content. I've also been posting a lot of just talks of things that are interesting me right now. A lot of meditation talks, some bodywork stuff. So Instagram's a really good spot to be as well for all of that updated content. We also do have a Patreon. Right now, I don't have any rewards until I reach a certain amount of listeners. Then I'm going to be releasing 21st Century Vitalism After Hours, which is going to be a bonus show with me and my friends. I'm not going to have any sort of pretense for what we're talking about. It's just going to be shooting from the hip. So if you're wanting a little bit more of the show, then once we get to a certain amount, then that's going to be behind the Patreon. Still figuring out the pricing for that. But if you want to support us, every little bit helps. Even if it's $1, it helps me build momentum and helps me invest more time and have it feel reciprocal in that way. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I want to thank Russell right off the bat for joining me and educating me. It was great. I love this episode. I love it. So yeah, that's it, friends. Yeah, that's it. Open your hearts, drink some tea, do some stretches, and welcome Russell Stolzoff. Russell, hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I know you're really busy, so this really does mean a lot to me.
Well, thank you for asking me, Brett, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. So I know we talked a little bit on the phone prior to actually organizing this. So you, as well as my listeners, know that I'm a licensed massage therapist, and something that I've noticed with a lot of my veteran bodywork clients is that the people who've been in it a long time have all talked up this practice called Rolfing. So in reaching out to you, I literally was Googling. I was like, who's good at talking about Rolfing? And you kept coming up. So I listened to a podcast with you in it, and I was like, that's the guy. So starting off, I don't really know much about it. And I'm just kind of curious if we could actually kind of outline what this practice is and how it could potentially benefit people. So wherever you think is maybe the best place to start with that, I trust you.
Yeah, the practice, and I'm glad that you use the word practice because it really is a practice. And I would say that, well, first of all, I just want to say a little disclaimer because Rolfing is the original form of a type of body work that is known by its generic term, structural integration. So when Dr. Ida Rolf created Rolfing, developed it, back in I would say really around the 1940s and 50s. She didn't call the work Rolfing. It was called structural integration. So, and then people became fond of her. Rolfing kind of caught fire in the human potential movement of the late 1960s and early mid 1970s at a place called the Esalen Institute on the Big Sur coastline in California. And that's where the people who would become the first teachers after her of Rolfing encountered her, and people would say, oh, I'm going to go get Rolfed, because Dr. Rolf was the one doing the Rolfing, you know, and it kind of, the name kind of came that way. Fast forward to 2020, and there are a number of ways to train as a structural integration practitioner. The Rolf Institute is the original and the first, and remains probably the largest training organization. But so if I use the word in our conversation, Rolfing, I really mean it to refer to not only Rolfing and not only the Rolfing brand of structural integration, but I'm being an old person and a Rolfer. I sort of reflexively say that. So, so really, it's been around for a while, and it's a practice based on the perspective that we live in the Earth's gravitational field, which means that certain things tend to happen to our bodies. And Rolfing is a way of addressing those things. Maybe most fundamentally, people tend to get compressed over time and twisted. Gravity and other things, behaviors, moods, emotions, experiences, they tend to sometimes cause us to get disintegrated physically as well as in other realms. And Rolfing is a way of decompressing and untwisting the body by helping all of the major weight-bearing segments align better to each other, which helps to balance the body better in gravity it's constant force. We're not really aware of it. And that helps us to move better and ultimately just have a better lived experience in our bodies. So that's the way that we accomplish that is by working in this web, this endless web, as it's been called, of fascia that is both seamless and ubiquitous, pervasive throughout the body. It's just starts underneath your skin. It penetrates all the way into your bones. It surrounds and folds, compartmentalizes everything that you can think of as a structure or some anatomical thing in your body. Fascia is surrounding it and probably penetrating it. And Dr. Ida Rolf made fascia the centerpiece of Rolfing when she developed it. And as most people have heard now, fascia has become a popular thing, you know, some 70 years later. But Rolfers have been working with fascia, manipulating fascia to get the body to realign and be more at home and in harmony with Earth's gravitational field, and help people move better for a long time. So that is the practice of Rolfing.
That sounds about right. I haven't studied Rolfing extensively, but I have studied the myofascial system kind of extensively, and namely the part of it that I've heard that it's the most neurologically dense part of the body, that there's 70% more nociceptors in the myofascia than there are even in the muscle tissues themselves. Is that true?
I've heard the same thing. And I mean, and the people who are saying that are doing the kind of research that helps to determine that. So I don't have that research at my fingertips. But I know that the more they look into what is in the fascia, the more they realize that it's not it's far from this kind of like superfluous tissue that you dissect out of the way to get to the things that matter. But so yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of receptors in the fascia.
Mm. So why is it that a lot of Western medicine and like physical therapy and stuff kind of disregards the fascial system? It seems like I've talked to a lot of trainers and other people who are in the healthcare field, and when I bring up like myofascial studies and some of the ideas behind it, I always get like the deer in headlights look. And a lot of people are like, I've never even like thought about that. Is this being taught in like mainstream education right now, or is it slowly making its way, or why is there that weird tension?
I don't have the definitive answer to that question. It's a great question, and I have a couple of thoughts. And the first one is that it's just a historical artifact. You start doing something some way, and it kind of works. It develops its own internal logic, and you don't look for other answers. Your curiosity kind of ends there or something, or to the extent that it remains, it follows the line that you're on. And so it's only been probably in the last 15 years or something that the fascia research has started to open up the realities that we're discovering. And I think that the educational systems that have been in place for a long time in the medical field, which is I think what you're predominantly referring to, even if you're talking about physical therapy, that's a branch. It's a branch off of the medical field. I think that that those things it's just an artifact of the way that they've always looked at it. And then the kind of I mean, I have no bones. It's not totally true, but I have nothing against the medical field or doctors. I believe in them and trust them with my own body, but the perspective is limited, and part of the problem is that along the way they've gotten to be the sort of arbiter of all things body related, the ultimate authority, and so we all turn to them to know what's real. Fortunately, there are doctors now that are involved in fascial studies and starting to develop our knowledge and spread the knowledge that's being discovered, and so that's a really good thing, and I think that it flows from there.
Yeah. It almost feels like there's like a momentum of scientific advancement that kind of maybe potentially gets in the way of it seeing new potentialities. Because then if you like take in this thing like, oh, like this myofascia is this continuous web that one point affects all the other points, it causes a lot of like, we need to regress and like re-examine some of the base structures. And it's like, that is so much more work. So it almost seems easier to just kind of bulldoze that, and like until it reaches critical mass, then it's like, oh, now we have to look at it, but there's kind of this like blind momentum that goes forward. And I feel like, yeah,
there's a lot of problems. I mean, the other problem is that, in science, until you can prove it, it's kind of not thought to be real. And, but a lot of scientists will say, well, there's all kind of things we know are real, then we can't prove it through science. And I think Rolfing and things related to Rolfing and body work and things that essentially we're doing from the outside of the body that we can't really see the effects of what we're doing. We can't prove it. We don't really, ultimately, we really don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And so we're enamored of these tissues, and we're kind of tripping out like, oh wow, fascia's everywhere, and and isn't it cool? And like, I think we can feel it, but we don't really know if we feel it. And it's really, and Ida Rolf was quite clear about this. One of the quotes I like to share with my students is from something she said, when you're Rolfing, you not only think you're in a morass, you are in a morass. And then she goes on to say that essentially what she's trying to do is to teach Rolfers to just pay attention to what they can see and feel and the relationships between those things, and to try and improve them. That's an inherently insecure process. Like, you're never really sure. And so science doesn't like that. And so there's really kind of a divide there, like the mind of a person that goes into Rolfing, is different, I think, than someone who goes into research or science, or needs to have evidence-based certainty to be able to proceed. If we required that, we would never put a hand on anybody.
Yeah. Well, I think it also points to a really important aspect of body work that I always try and distill into my clients, is that the subjective experience is a very primary and important aspect of what body work is. Whether or not we can fully articulate it into words, if you have an experience of deeper levels of embodiment, understanding, that's what we're doing. If you can change the way that you feel within your body, then that's healing. So I really think it's important in between that space, you're able to actually create an experience that they carry with them forever. And I really think this has a potential to really step into that.
I agree completely. It's and at the same time, there are some subjective experiences that you can say are sort of loosely connected, or maybe even not connected to what's real. And so it sort of begs the question of, like, just because you had the experience, is it does it reflect like a physical reality? And so I think for me as a practitioner, one of the guiding requirements, I guess, or continuous practice, a standard, that I try to hold myself to, is that my subjective experiences match something that's real, and as closely as I can get it to be. And that's kind of like through what I would say is rigorous testing of my subjectivity. And so it's not like, I don't want to be making it up. I don't want to tell anybody that I'm doing something that I'm not doing just because I think I might be doing it, so I'd rather say I don't know. On the other hand, there are certain reliable things that do happen, and I've tested those things, and ultimately you could say, well, it's just going through Russell's subjective filter, and so he could be making the whole thing up. And I grant that that's a possibility, but I've developed over time ways of testing what I do that I believe, but also that I hope, as deeply hope, that those things are real. They're, and I'm using my subjectivity to do it. Because that's really all we have. We don't use instruments that measure things. So
Yeah. Well, I think also I like the idea of like the intention to integrity, like continuously opening up to what like the evidence points to, but still like not uh, abandoning the whole thing, but adapting it and like working with it. And that's honestly like the more scientific thing is like what is the hypothesis is always changing, but it's like there's something true and genuine that's happening in this practice. We don't entirely know what, but because we don't know, we're open, so we're actually more receptive rather than like closing down. And I'm sure, after the 30 years of you doing it, you've had incredible results with probably hundreds if not thousands of people. So this has a place in the marketplace of wellness. And
Absolutely. It's very, very valuable. Once people start, we might be obscure, but once people understand that structural integration is a thing, they find a practitioner and they feel what it does for them, you probably have a client for life, not that you work with them all the time, but that they know you're in the community and they can access you when they need you, and that what you do is something that is not offered by a lot of people. So,
yeah. And I mean, honestly, all the clients that I've had that have had that work done revere it. Like that's like their benchmark. And then I'm always kind of like, well, dang, I'm probably not going to be able to meet that. But I'm glad to hear that it exists and they had these experiences.
yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, what exactly is it? We've kind of talked is addressing the body's relationship to gravity, how it's constantly compressing, but how do you actually work with that foundation, and like what does the session look like?
Well, the sessions look more like a massage therapy session than they do, say, like a chiropractic session or something like that. If I was going to compare to commonly understood, something that people might have an image in their mind about. In Rolfing, especially at the beginning of a Rolfer's years of practice, their Rolfers are trained in a process that treats the body systemically as a whole, but addresses certain relationships in each session that comprises a basic series. And the basic series is usually about 10 sessions. And that's how we train Rolfers. And essentially in the training process, what that does is it helps people, out of the sea of possibilities of what you could possibly do when you put your hands on somebody, in this session, you're going to look at these relationships. And then in the next session, you look at different relationships. You're still trying to see the whole, but it helps you because the whole is overwhelming. So it's a way of reliably progressing through to address the various strains and restrictions and places that the structure needs to be adjusted. And essentially what we tend to do is we tend to work on fascial density, places in the body where the structure is compromised. The structural relationships between segments are compromised by density. And then we start at the outside and we organize kind of layer by layer, if you will, even though you could argue that there are not really distinct layers in the body. We start at the outside and then we work our way in. We kind of organize our way in. So the first few sessions, we're kind of covering the body's surface. We're looking at issues of like breathing, spatial relationships. In the second session, we look at the body's relationship to the ground. So we work a lot in the feet and legs because support is critical for changes that happen above. If you think about like putting a roof on a house where a foundation is even off by a quarter of an inch over 10 or 20 years, the house is going to sag over. So we try to make the base very supportive. And then in the middle sessions, we work more deeply in the body, closer to the spine, on structures that connect legs and spine, such as a psoas. And then in the last sessions, we're trying to kind of tie it all together. We kind of integrate the work we've done that is a little more differentiating, because things kind of tend to get compressed, and so we try to make space. I don't know if I'm being clear to what you were wondering about.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great like overview of kind of like the process of going through this. I'm just kind of curious, when you say myofascial density, are you referring to like myofascial trigger points or like knots as people would refer to them, or is this something a little bit more nuanced?
Well, that's a great question. I think sometimes it's nuanced, but usually it's not. I mean, I think sometimes people would say, "Oh," like a lot of my clients will say, "Oh, yeah, that's a knot." I would say, "What does this feel like?" It's a knot. I'm working on a place where the body is sort of stiffer, and really it's kind of like my favorite metaphors for are non animal metaphors. For example, trees, I think, have an interesting, the grain pattern in trees is not purely linear. It twists, and even in a twig, you can see that twig is fundamentally growing upward, but it kind of twists and turns to get there. And then as the tree gets bigger and thicker, the outer bark pattern will reflect the twisting of that inner twig that was once, a young tree. And so I would say, we're following these contours, and the contours have strain and density in them, and we're interacting with those densities to try and get the body more balanced around its center line. And the center line is not an anatomical structure, but it's the symbol of gravity itself that runs through us. So maybe in physics you would call that the center of balance, and there's some relationship there with the center of mass. But so we're trying to balance that the body around its center.
That's interesting. So when we're talking about like physiologically speaking, like that density, like what is it that is physically getting dense, and like what is that process of smoothing that out? Do you know like
That's another really good question. I think that, for one thing, the fascia. So in the muscles are surrounded by fascia. But then if you go into the bellies of the muscles, indeed, every fiber of muscle has a much finer substance, connective tissue, fascial substance around it. So it really is like this web, and that stuff, that collagenous fibrous matrix of tissue that muscles are embedded in, has an ability to thicken itself in response to strain. So if your weight is not transmitting cleanly, I would say, or close to its center, the center of the mass, then what happens is the fascia bolsters it. And it doesn't do this in, usually over a long, it happens in a twisting way, because that's really how the body is. It's not linear. Muscles are not straight up and down. Nothing is straight in the body. So there are places where it gets thick, and that's where. And so I think that that's part of the reason, anyway, that we get these thicknesses. Now, to your other question, which is what's happening when we're interacting with it. It's not totally clear. We used to think that we were sort of what I call rolling out the dough, that we were actually, and I think Dr. Rolf believed that that we were actually lengthening the tissues, the fascial tissue itself. Okay, then 20 some years ago, Rolfer, who's become famous now as a fascial scientist, his name is Robert Schleip, did some experiments that showed that there's no way that we can deform fascia enough to account for what we see and what we think is happening according to that hypothesis that we're rolling out the dough and lengthening the fascia. And so then what happened was that we started looking for other models, and we're still doing that. And then with the advent of the nervous system, there, like over the last 10 years or so, I would say, the brain became, this kind of started receiving a lot of focus, and everything in the body was thought to be an output of the brain, and not just pain. And so body workers, Rolfers, started saying, well, we're just interacting with the brain, and we're not really changing anything in the physical structure. And that's a perspective too. And then there's this issue of like the way that fascia mediates fluids in the body. And so because there's an extracellular matrix that is, the fascia is within two, and that can has various densities and viscosities to it. So there's some thinking that maybe what we're doing is we're influencing the way that fluids flow around these places that we perceive are dense, and that we can encourage them to flow better. I happen to think that that is at least a piece of it. And then there's this French doctor, he's a hand surgeon who's been popular at the fascial research congresses that have happened periodically over the last 15 or so years. And he has some videos that look under the skin. In fact, one of them is called Strolling Under the Skin. His name is Gimberto. And he puts a camera in, and as far as I know, it's the only live kind of in situ view into what is the living fascial matrix look like. And it's really remarkable. I encourage people who are interested to go see it, because and he's in the first layers of fascia under the skin. So fascia has many forms and densities, but in this loose kind of fascia that's just underneath the skin, the fibers seem to morph like right in front of your eyes, and nobody's applying any pressure, or if they are, it's just the pressure of the camera, or maybe they're touching the skin on top, and that's tugging on the fascia below. And what you see is this kind of fractalized fibrous network, random, that is moving, and some fibers are joining others are taking off from the ones they're connected to, and it's pretty trippy. And so in my mind, I don't get a lot of traction with people when I talk about this, but they think I'm crazy. But in my mind, that leaves open the idea that we are changing fascia from the outside with pressure. And we just haven't been able to show it. We can't measure it. It may not be significant. So it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, that totally did. I'm reading right now through The New Rules of Posture by Mary Bond, and it's leaving me with a lot of food for thought on the idea of how we can actually change the myofascial shape. In that, I mean, the entire thing about Rolfing and structural integration is about organizing the body's structures in relation to gravity. And it almost seems like posture is the most fundamental way that we can do. That's like the only lasting way to make change, is to like bring in awareness to how we're holding our body. And I've been trying to communicate this to my clients, that like I'll be very upfront with them. Like, I can bring you in a state of like deep relaxation, but unless you take this work into your life and start learning about the systems of your body, it's likely just going to be very temporary. Do you think that potentially bringing the act of bringing awareness to certain structures and like kind of correcting them might be maybe the best way we can start alleviating a lot of these chronic adhesions?
I think it's another way in. And I think that, and you could even say that all we're doing when we're doing body work, or maybe not all we're doing, but a big part of what we're doing is we're helping bring people's awareness to places in their own bodies so that they can respond to how they are. And I mean, by how they are, I mean like how they are right there where you're touching them. So it's like every touch, every sort of touch intervention can become like an invitation to the client to respond in a way that increases their ability to live more in those places, and to move differently in those places. And I think that, when you can, so you don't have to do that through touching. You can do that through educating about movement. And that's what Mary Bond does very expertly. And she, and she's taken these a lot, Mary's a Rolfer, and, but she's focused on movement. And there's a branch of Rolfing education called Rolfing movement integration. And that is kind of the more functional aspect of Rolfing, where we look at awareness, how to move, awareness of your body through movement, awareness of your body in movement, awareness of the space that you occupy, how you occupy space, and what you do in your body, sort of habitually, and where there's limitations, how you can open up possibilities. So I think that it all goes together. And I think some people prefer to work more on that end of it, and some people prefer to work more on the sort of hands-on manipulation, and some Rolfers combine them quite effectively. But I think your orientation toward your clients is exactly right. There has to be, it's one thing to have a feel-good experience. It's another thing to be seeking to change something that is in a more lasting way. And so that's kind of, in Rolfing we talk about three paradigms. One is sort of the relaxation paradigm, which you could say maybe is like the spa massage. The other is corrective, which is more like, we're trying to fix something maybe orthopedically. Someone sprains their ankle. And then the third paradigm, which we endeavor and aspire to work in, is what we call the holistic paradigm, which says, well, yeah, you sprain your ankle, but really, that has meaning through that it's propagated through your whole body. In fact, maybe you sprained it because you were off balance in the first place. And anyway, even if that isn't the case and you sprained it, it's going to have an effect throughout your whole system. And there's also different layers to that whole holistic view, which, includes the more psychological and dimension as well. So yeah, I think we want to help people change. and we want lasting change.
Where would you say that you find yourself in that three different paradigm thing? Are you approaching the holistic way as well with your clients? Do you try and take that sprained ankle and go deeper into their experience, or do you kind of prefer to do the hands-on, or where are you at with that?
I'm pretty, I'm a hands-on guy. I mean, my first experiences with Rolfing were direct fascial manipulation, changed my life and made me want to be a Rolfer. And that is what I've spent, the last 35 years trying to get better and better at every day. So I also, if I really look at it, I think what drew me to Rolfing was I love beautiful movement. And so you can't really separate these things, but I don't work as much with people in movement as I do with them, with my hands on through manipulation. But in reality, those three paradigms are always kind of intermingling with each other. But if you only have the relaxation paradigm, or you only have the corrective paradigm, and you don't have a way of understanding the relationship between these things and which place you're working in, and maybe somebody can't relax, you're never going to get to holism if you can't help them relax. So you have to be adept at creating the possibility for people. And I think that what I do, I take people where they are, where they come from. I don't have an agenda for them. I don't tend to want things for them that they don't want for themselves. And that's something I've had to learn. And so, even though I might be able to see possibilities, I don't necessarily assume that that's what other people want. So the contract, if you will, that I form with people is based on, what they come in expressing the need for help with. And then, if that dovetails with my skill set, then, off we go. And I'm open to it evolving, because sometimes people are like, wow, like I didn't know that what I was coming to you for was going to lead to this. And so then it can kind of open up and blossom, and people can develop new and deeper relationships to themselves through their bodies, and that's a beautiful thing.
I noticed so many parallels between that and just the massage therapy profession, and the idea that there's the three different paradigms. And I've been doing a lot of trades with other therapists from different schools and backgrounds, and notice that it always comes to be like one of two kinds of folks who are really focused on the relaxation, which is a fine experience, but I end up leaving kind of feeling the same. And then I have the really medical massage therapists who I guess do good work, but it hurts, and I am not relaxed, and I find myself guarding a lot against it. And I've tried to toe the line in my own practice of it is important to me that the relaxation is a part of it, but I also want to make sure that we're creating lasting change. So I'm just seeing a lot of similarities in that kind of thing. And that's really important.
I think that, one thing that comes up when I listen to you make that comparison is that in the medical approach, the problem is already defined, and even the area of treatment is defined, and the idea that the system of the body, or that the area that's broader than the defined area is perhaps contributing to the problem area that's been defined, is not really present in that perspective. And that is the corrective idea. So you're not saying, well, we need to work with everything in order to help the place that's being identified as the problem. And I think that's one of the strong suits of structural integration, is that we're recognizing that essentially the body is a tensegrity system, and there is no place in isolation from anywhere else. And now it may be very difficult to discern the ways that distant places are contributing to reinforce the problem, or how the problem itself might be creating problems elsewhere. It might be hard to perceive that. But over time, for me personally, that's the beauty of practice over time, is that you get more and more able to see some of these things, or at least to search for them and find them, even if you can't see it at the outset, to discover them. And that's what keeps the practice so exciting for me. But I think that when a practitioner says, well, it's just a shoulder, it's a back spasm, or, and you go in there and you don't have the idea that the structure's twisted, and that's part of what's creating the problem. So you're able to relax the area, and then the area just reconstitutes itself because the system is driving it back to do that. And so that, I'm sort of like kind of obliquely putting in a plug for the approach of structural integration, because what we really do is we teach how to practice with the awareness that there are system-wide patterns of compensation, and that is something that that ends up being a very effective way of addressing localized concerns. And I can remember earlier in my practice when I would be anxious about it, because my clients would come in and say, oh, it's my this or my that. And I would say, well, I know I got to work over somewhere far away from there, because I've worked on this thing enough and it's better, but it's not as good as it could be. And I finally just started saying, hey, is it okay with you if I concentrate on this, but not only on this? And everybody just said, sure. And then I felt relaxed and I could do my work.
Yeah, that's literally a conversation I have with like 9 out of 10 of my clients. I mean, they come in with like the upper cross syndrome going on and all these issues. I'm like, well, there's also like the aspect of your lower back, which goes into your glutes, which goes into your hamstrings. And
exactly.
At first, a lot of people, I can see some people like hesitation. They're like, this is the thing that hurts. I'm like, that's a symptom of a set of conditions. So by addressing like the entire body-wide set of conditions, we're able to actually, over time, it's a more holistic, rather than fixing it from the top down, we're fixing it from the bottom up. And There's also like the really simple, unarguable fact that being in a deep state of relaxation reduces the global muscle tone as well. So I've had a lot of massages from folks who come in with the idea that they're going to fix something. And you can feel that intention, like communicate through their hands. There's an issue here. And then they drill it and they drill it. And the rest of my body is like tensing up around it. So it creates this like weird, like you relax that area, but the rest of my body is tense now.
And you feel pinned, you feel pinned to a spot. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's just, it might be on the right spot, but they need to broaden out too.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, what do you think? So like as a massage therapist, what do you think the benefit of Rolfing is over traditional massage therapy? I mean, is it just the fact that there's a series of 10 and you're going through that, or
no,
is there room for massage therapy?
Yeah, well, sure there is. I mean, I think the most honest and spacious thing I can say is that it really comes down to the practitioner and how they know how they relate to the body. And one of the things that I mostly keep to myself, but I think about, is I want to relate to the body as it is and as I can experience it. Like, I don't want to be making things up about the body. And so it, like, if you think about, all these different ways that you can go study and learn about methods to help people in the bodywork realm, um, it's not that one is better than the other. It's how close is that modality to something that's real, and then how much does it help the practitioner learn or give them a structure or a pathway to be able to develop their ability to help their clients. And I think that, so right away now we're out of the realm of one thing is better than another. Now you could say that some schools or some methods teach that better than the other ones do. But I just, it's like, I have clients that go to their massage therapist still. They like that, they come to me and I focus on the problems or something like that. And they go to the massage therapist and they have like a more whole body relaxation experience or something along those lines. And they like both, and that's fine. So I don't, and then, it comes down to the practitioner. There's great massage therapists that they're not Rolfers, but they do great work and they probably accomplish some of the same things that Rolfers do, and maybe some other things that Rolfers don't. So, I mean, it's really, obviously I'm a Rolfer, and so I'm bullish on that training and what it's because I know what it's given me. It's given me a structure that to unfold my abilities within that, that as far as I can tell doesn't have any end to it. And so, and there is structure around it. And I think that's, you could say on the one hand, there's free flow, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's structure. And if you free flow too much, you may not be really affecting things structurally. If you structure too much, then, like you just described, the person's like drilling into this problem and they're not aware of, how it flows out from there. So I think the Rolfing education's great, but it's not for everyone.
Kind of just thought of the metaphor that like a great musician will make great music, probably despite the instrument. It's, the driver of the car will be a good driver regardless of the car. It's like, that's just the vehicle that you're using to get to the end goal, but it's all the intention and the heart space of the person who's doing the work.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, we're looking for, people with aptitude, and they're going to be good at whatever they choose.
Yeah, I think specifically in this field of body work, I think receptivity is truly, I love that you said like you meet the body where it is. And I think that that's something that really sets apart a good body worker from run of the mill or average, if you will. But it's like the ability and willingness to listen to what the body is communicating. And I think just like honestly meeting it where it is, rather than, I feel like the idea of fixing it is saying to the body, you're not good enough where you are. And that tenses the body more. It re-solidifies that patterning in the nervous system, where if you meet it with the proper amount of pressure that supports it, but doesn't like crush it, I think that the body wants to like release into it, That's been my approach. It's like, I don't really buy into the deep tissue massage modality too much, because I feel like it lends itself really well to that kind of fixer up attitude. And, but a lot of people really want that, So I also have to acknowledge that there's degrees in that, because you have to also accommodate people's expectations, because if you completely miss that mark, then you're just not doing them a good service. You're not meeting them where they're at. But at the same time, there's an education towards like, we can actually treat the body in a little gentler of a way. And that should be the process. Like, as we do this, you should need maybe less and less pressure to have the same effect. I don't know if that fits in at all, but
I think it does. It fits in perfectly. I think that it's exactly right. I mean, deep tissue, depth for depth's sake is not really a good way to go. We're not just trying to give people the intensity of experience, and most people can take more if they're equating intensity with effect, then they need some education about how to maybe sense themselves differently, or they might have to take it on on trust at first, but that it's not just, it's about what's happening as a result of the touch, not just the sensation of the touch, so that they're experiencing. Now, sometimes you can use the sensation as a way to sort of engage people, and that's a really good thing to do, and that's part of, I think, meeting them where they are. If like some guy's all revved up, or or they're super high energy, a lot of tension in the body, and and they won't sort of register that you're entering their world until you match that level of intensity with your pressure. If you sort of stay on the outside of that and kind of go, well, this is where I feel, and and I want you to come meet me here, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? So and then other people, you just can't, they're already kind of out there and they're super sensitive, and so it's really about it's really about knowing what you're going after, and not so much about the level of pressure, because that's not, at least in my practice, that's not the goal. The goal is sort of, the pressure is a means to accomplish the intended effect, and it's interesting, a lot of people don't want to have a narrative. A lot of practice, it's important, I believe, I guess is one way to say this better, is that I think it's important for practitioners to develop a narrative about what they think their work is doing and what is happening when they're doing it, so that they can, if they were to be asked, why are you doing what you're doing right now, you'd be able to tell them, your client, or tell yourself, maybe more importantly. And that's not always so easy, because we can kind of get lost in the doing of it. And but I think it's a good skill to pay attention to.
I totally agree. I think that that's a really wonderful way of kind of kicking the tires of the vehicle that you're driving. You got to like test it out a little bit, but you got to have faith in what you're doing too, because if you don't, that's going to communicate through your confidence. If you don't know why you're doing something, that communicates.
That's the rub when you're first getting started, especially, and earlier on, like, it's hard to have confidence when you don't have experience,
right?
So I don't know, maybe the fake it till you make it comes into mind, but you can at least have the idea that you have an intention, and that what you're doing is in the direction of that intention. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Rolfing, is that it teaches practitioners a way of being effective before they can fully understand how it works.
Yeah.
And so it gives you like it's not a protocol, but it's, as I said, it's a progressing list of territorial kind of considerations, and that helps get you in the ballpark, and then and people's bodies will get better, and you'll be like, and practicing that over time gives you the understanding of how the body is and how it works, and it kind of unfolds for you in that way. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. It's like you couldn't probably go to school long enough to learn that way.
Yeah. It's kind of like the teacher in this case is always the student, like the practitioner. Like the feeling that I'm getting with Rolfing, I mean, honestly, all body work is like we're really uncovering aspects of ourselves through the shared space of working with clients. And like that is the never ending unfolding, which actually deepens our ability to affect change, is because we're affecting change on ourselves. And that's what the space is. Both are kind of transformed.
Yeah, one of my wise older colleagues, who happens to also be a Jungian psychologist, says that in the end, Rolfing is for the Rolfer, and I don't know what to think of that. I don't know how to really, it's kind of, for me, it's kind of a koan, but I also, because I go like, wait a minute, it's not just for the raw. Wait a minute, it's not. No, it's for the clients. Come on, And then I think, well, like when I think about what Rolfing has given me as a practitioner, like it's this weird thing that I've been made my living doing it. I support myself and my daughter, and it's like I help people every day, and they appreciate it, and it gives me a vehicle for understanding my perception, and for developing it, my sensitivity, the way that I relate to people, and I mean, I just can't even say enough about that. How grateful I am about that, because I mean, it's and lately, just the idea that like I have a job where people appreciate me all the time, and it's like that's pretty rare. I'm coming to realize,
Yeah.
like not everybody, and so like it's not like I go to work going like, oh, I need these strokes or something, but like incidentally, it's a better vibe, to like have that exchange of energy where I'm earnestly trying to help people, and they're feeling appreciative of it, and they value it enough to pay me for my work, and it's awesome. It's really awesome, and it's not going away. I don't feel like I'm not going to get like replaced by AI.
Yeah.
I'm not going to live long enough to have to really worry about it, but it's like, so yeah, and I think I'm just going strong.
That's really good to hear. It's one of the few professions that there's no exploitation. It's a net positive for everybody involved. And
Yeah,
I'd say the things that are good for you truly are also good for your entire network as well. So the fact that
absolutely.
you can tune into that, I think, is a really good indicator.
Yep.
I know you do have a limited amount of time,
Mm.
so I do want to just close this out by saying thank you so much, Russell. I really appreciate this. You taking the time to chat with me. I love talking with other body workers, especially folks who have been in it a little bit longer than me, because sometimes when you're in your practice, it can be a little isolating. It's like, am I
Absolutely.
interpreting this right? Or so this is kind of giving me another win. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me, Brett. And I think, your intelligence comes through, and it's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you. And yeah, and the isolating piece is real, and I think it's important to reach out when you're feeling isolated to others. So I appreciate you doing that with me, and we'll be happy to connect with you anytime.
Awesome. Thank you. I could definitely see this being a recurring theme in the show. So I'll
Awesome.
keep you on the list, and yeah, I'll be touching back with you pretty soon here. So
Okay, great. Sounds good. Maybe we could
thank
get
you.
more specific.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I just wanted to have an overview. A lot of people, myself included, I'm like, I kind of know what it is, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, there's so much. I mean, we didn't make it through everything I had on the list.
Okay, well,
So,
good. We'll do it
yeah.
again then if it works for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah. All right.
All right. Well, hope you have a great day. Enjoy your time with your clients.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, my friends, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through till the end. I really do make this show for you. If you want to keep in touch with Russell, head on over to RolfingWorks.com. Check out a lot of his content there. It's a lot of fun. He's got some media, he's got some workshops. And yeah, tune in 2 weeks to sit down with the ineffable Michael Garfield as we talk about finding balance on the brink of collapse. Kind of a leap in content, but that's what we're all about here. It's a wide umbrella, and you should probably know what to do when we're facing, climate change. That's a real deal. So, yeah, if you want to support the show, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, subscribe over on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, interact with the stuff. All of that helps. We also got the Patreon working. Head on over to the new website if you haven't. It's www.21stcenturyvitalism.com. If you know anybody who wants to be on the show, or if you want to be on the show, shoot me an email. All that stuff's going to be over on the website. Thank you again so much for listening all the way through till the end. We will catch you in 2 weeks with Michael Garfield.